I noticed that she had learned that if she had an itch on her nose, that by rubbing her nose against my shoulder or against my chest would make that itch go away. And I found that when I would pick her up at certain times, she would rub her nose up against my shoulder, she would rub something against me. And that led me to the question, why is it when we have an itch? Do you guys know what I mean by itch? Okay. Why is it when you have an itch? How many of you, let me ask you this question. If we're going to show that these principles of behavior really do work and they work for everyone across the board, here's a perfect example. How many of you, when you have an itch on your shoulder, do this? Oh, you're laughing? You think that's funny? Anybody? Anybody? Not one single person in this room. But you're all individuals, correct? You all have your own personal choice and your own will to choose to do anything you want. So why is it when you get an itch on your shoulder you don't do this? Well, if we look at the contingencies in the environment, they show us that there's no benefit in this to you. Even if you did try it once. I'm sure my baby tried it the first time she had an itch on her nose. She went, ah! And the itch didn't go away. So doing this gave her no benefit. Okay? So, what did give her benefit? Well, the one time I happened to pick her up and she rubbed her nose against my shoulder and she said, oh, wow, that was cool. Suddenly, something happened after this behavior that she said, hey, I want that to happen again next time I have an itch. How do I do that? And that's the process of learning. We basically, the environment tells us what is most beneficial to us. And then we start to respond to it in ways that are most successful. Does this make sense to everybody? And this expands across everything we do. The type of language that we learn to speak, the way that we choose to drive, whether we speed or don't speed is going to all be determined based upon the benefits that those things give to us. So I always have lots of desires pulling on me. And the desires that win out are the ones that are the strongest in the moment. I mentioned something to some of you. Some of you guys have your hands like this, or you might be sitting like this right now. At what point would you choose to do that? How often, you all walked in here, you all sat down, but not everyone sat down and did this at the same time, did they? Some of you did, some of you didn't. Maybe it has to do with what you've been doing before you came in. Maybe it has to do with the way that your back is aligned and how your posture sits. If sitting down in this kind of position long enough causes you to start to feel fatigue or to feel any kind of aches or pains, you're going to start to do behaviors intended to relieve that. How do I get rid of these aches and pains? And at some point you find a position that's comfortable. Well, I'm going to stay here for a little while. And then at some point it becomes uncomfortable again because your body needs to move and change, so you change. So basically ABA is nothing more than trying to figure out what is it in our environment that causes us to make the everyday choices we make. And then let's apply that understanding to kids who really need that in order to be able to make even progress in the basics. Okay? Let's see why a child with autism who screams and cries every time his mom picks up the telephone. What is it in the environment that that child is getting from screaming and crying that they weren't getting before mom picked up the phone? Make sense? Mom picks up the phone, child starts to scream and cry. The mom says, okay, hold on. Then the child starts to knock over a plant. And the mom says, okay, that's it. I have to go. She just knocked over a plant. Hangs up the phone and goes and plays with the child. Okay? What's happening in the environment that's probably causing the child to knock over the plant? Well, if screaming and crying didn't work to get mom off the phone, and then knocking over the plant got mom off the phone, and the child says, aha, I just scratched my itch. I had this itch I wanted. I wanted mom off the phone. And I tried this, screaming and crying. It didn't work. But then I knocked over the plant, and mom came running. Aha. Next time mom picks up the phone, I'm not even going to bother with screaming and crying anymore. I'm just going to go start knocking stuff off the counters. And it's this kind of understanding and this kind of analysis that we do in applied behavior analysis. And then what we do is we start to see what it is that's causing and motivating individual choices in individual children. What is it that's reinforcing to them so that they'll make better choices? And what is it that we need to not allow to happen so that they stop making the bad ones? So for instance, if I have a child who is knocking over plants when we are on the phone, well, what we have to do is we have to stop hanging up the phone when they knock things over. Okay? We have to be able to keep on the phone. We have to maybe protect the child, block from breaking things, take some things that are really important out of the environment, and let them knock over things that are not important. Let them run around and do that. Let them scream and yell for a few minutes while we stay on the phone. Then, as soon as we see them calm down, quiet, grab another toy, or do anything at all that is more appropriate, we hang up the phone and say, "Oh, that was so great, what do you want?" And then we give them the attention for that. And we start to show the child that the reinforcement you want, mom getting off the phone, is no longer going to be available for these inappropriate behaviors. But we're going to make sure that that same reinforcement is now available for more appropriate choices. If a child runs to you and grabs and tries to steal the cookies out of your hands, well, we make sure that the child does not get access to cookies in that moment. But as soon as they wait and they make the sign for cookie, or whatever we choose the sign to be for cookie, or they hand me a PEX card for cookie, then, boom, I'm giving them the cookies, and I make sure that they have access to the cookies. Now, that's the basics behind applied behavior analysis. We really want to understand the everyday interactions. And every interaction that happens between you and your environment, you know, there's millions and millions of interactions that happen every day between you and your environment. At this moment in time, there are all kinds of things in this environment that could be causing you to make choices in your behavior. I already pointed out a few with scratching or putting your hand here. Some of you have something to drink in front of you. How many of you actually do this behavior motion when there's nothing to drink in front of you? Anyone? I just did, but that's because I had another reason. I was demonstrating and trying to get a point across, so I did have a motivation for it. But the rest of you, I don't see you guys out here doing this all day. There's only one point in time when you will do that, and there are certain things that we have to analyze about the environment that tell us why and when you would do that behavior, so that we can then control. If we can start to control those things that happen before the behavior and those things that happen after the behavior, and we can start to play with those things, we can figure out what it is that's going to motivate the behaviors we're looking for, the choices we're looking for. And it's not that we're manipulating the child. We're not trying to take a child and force them to participate in something specific. What we're doing is we're rearranging the environment so that the environment is now teaching the child the better choice making, so that the child can learn the things that they need to have more choices to make. They have more freedoms, more abilities, so that they can start doing more things and have a better life. But we're not controlling or changing the child. What we're doing is we're controlling and changing the environment around the child so that it starts reinforcing the right behaviors and starts putting the wrong behaviors on what we call extinction, which means no longer allowing reinforcement to follow them. Does that make sense? Right now, I'm just going to very briefly give you the basic contingency. Life is, all of our interactions are about three major things. Antecedents to behavior. These are things in the environment that happen before behavior, things that are around us. Then there's the behavior. These are the things that we do. And then there's the consequence. These are the things that are happening after the behavior is done. No matter what we do in our environment, there's going to be something before it that to some degree caused that behavior. And there's going to be something after it that causes us to want to use that behavior again in the future or not use it again in the future. Does that make sense? It's just basically three parts. And as behavior analysts, if we can really identify and break down these three parts, we can understand how to best work with kids. Specifically, in my instance, kids with autism, who often are not being very successfully taught in other programs. The reason that ABA is so often put together with autism is not that it's designed for autism, it's just that autism is one of those diagnoses that kids with autism tend to not do very well in most any program. And it's ABA that has been able to, through study and through science, been able to show that it has the very best success rate. On top of that, there's a specific style of autism, a specific style of ABA that we profess, or that we use, called verbal behavior, and I'd like to teach a little bit about that as well.